Idolatry confuses the second commandment with the first commandment. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. This is part 4 of our 5-part series looking at some Jerusalem controversies, how Jesus is able to iron out the wrinkles. He's able to enlighten those misunderstandings and give us hope to know the way to go. When we look at Mark 12, again, Jesus is dealing with a lot of the struggles, even what we see in the Old Testament, and how we should handle ourselves. And he's putting them not so much in a new light, but he's putting more light on the same old problems. But before we look at this problem of idolatry, I want to thank you for watching. We appreciate you and your support and your prayers. Please subscribe to the channel. And because we don't do social media, we appreciate you passing this video on to someone else that you think might be encouraged. And please visit us online, changeministry.org. There's a prophecy series. Check it out, enjoy it, and get understanding and real hope for our future. So let's go to Mark chapter 12. In verse 29, this is Jesus answering a question where he is asked, what's the first and the greatest commandment? And we pick it up where Jesus answers him, okay, the first of all the commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment, period. Now the second. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. This is beautiful how this piggybacks on what we were talking about just in the previous study. This distinction between what is Caesar's and what is God's. And it's the primacy of God that gives us the ability to always be in the right standing with Caesar, if you will. We'll be above reproach. It kind of brings all the studies we've looked at. And if you haven't checked those out, go look at the other 3 before this one. But here we see Jesus is encouraging us to make sure that we know what is first and what is second, and we keep them in their proper rank. The way we treat other people, it makes a huge difference, because it makes a difference to me. The way that people treat me, whether it's my family, whether it's coworkers, whether it's students, or even whether it's people in my neighborhood, that makes a big difference in my life. When somebody doesn't blast their music or someone doesn't break into my back door, these are things that I appreciate. I value those things. We get the second commandment, but never forget that the second commandment is second to the first. And the first thing that we could do is love God. It's the most important thing that we could ever do. And never look at the second commandment as a means to keep the first. That's where we get in the righteousness by works. Being nice to people, but not keeping the law of God. Doing good works or even charity to people, but inside we have no character. That's not God's way. So when you go to Romans chapter 13, for example, and see the proper place of the second great commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. This is the golden rule. This is where we see the relational aspect of a relationship to God. We will treat people different when we're in right relationship to the one who made people. We're going to treat the creation differently when we're in the right place with the Creator. But never ever confuse the value of the relationships, because that's the admonition we get from Romans 13. But then we also go to Isaiah chapter 2, verse 20 to 22, where it says, in that day, a man shall cast his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made each one for himself to worship. See, what can happen is in our efforts to experience that second commandment, we could start treating people of greater value than God. Even the easiest one to do that to is ourselves. See, making idols to worship for himself, to the moles and to the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks and to the tops of ragged rocks for the fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. Cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostrils, for wherein is he to be accounted of? I love this verse because it reminds me of one of my brothers from college, Dwayne Dunkley. I remember the day when he shared this verse with me. We were in the dorm and he's saying it with his New York accent, and he's like lamenting and saying, man, God's just showing us, cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostrils. This does not do away with treating people right. No, not at all. In fact, again, If we are doing what God has called us to do, we will be above the reproach of men. But what it's saying here is that we've got to be mindful to not put our value, our hopes, our dreams in other people. Some of us are hurt or we get hurt because we put the expectations on people that only God can fulfill. People who we may even be more faulty than, but we expect more from them than we do of ourselves. All of that's a confusion of the second great commandment with the first. If we're giving glory to God, we give glory to God because he's the only one we can expect to be always anything. I mean, just always fill in the blank, whatever. But brothers and sisters, don't make that mistake. Always remember to love people. Yes, but we can only love people really if we truly love God.